We're going to talk about some Willy Wonka right now. Starting off with the classic, Gene Wilder. We have to start with Gene Wilder. Frickin' young Frankenstein, young Dr. Frankenstein himself. So, for Gene Wilder, I think the best part we can agree on, like, yes, the performances are great, but the best part is the music. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. I would
With the
agree.
main one, obviously, the main. So, I am a fan of the entire soundtrack. The start off song of Candy, like the Candyman, perfect opener. I'd still want to punch Grandpa Joe in the face for getting up and singing that song after pretending that he can't walk for like 10 years. And, but good songs. I got a golden ticket. Still good. Still good. But obviously, the powerhouse of the entire movie is Gene Wilder doing Pure Imagination, which we'll talk about again later. But Pure Imagination. What? How do you? What's your favorite part of that song?
I don't. If I'm gonna be honest, I don't think there is a favorite part. It's just that song just brings me back to being a child again. Like it was so good.
That song is goaded, and let me tell you, like I don't know what it is, but it's such a fun song, and then it's also like it makes you sad at the same time. It's so good, and you're like, wow, this song is beautiful. And then it gets so beautiful that you're like, I kind of want to cry while listening to it. Or if you're me, you just cry while listening to it. But that's yeah, the music is definitely the best part of this movie. I'll get to the worst part of this movie, which is the children. So, children, as everyone on Earth knows, are terrible, and these kids really take the cake. So, because I know that we have Violet, we have Veruca, we have Augustus, and we have Mike. Mike is a frickin' brat. And we like Mike is a brat, but he's like, play cowboys, and we're like, sit down. Veruca is spoiled, and this is the one I want it
I want
now.
it
I was like,
now,
when they
Daddy.
dropped her down that chute, I was like, you guys couldn't have done that 10 minutes ago when she started the song. Get her out of there. We have Augustus, which is still like, they threw a fat kid in the movie and they said, we're gonna have you be fat. And that's gonna be your entire character trait. You're gonna eat the entire movie, and if you're ever not eating, you're fired, and we're gonna replace you with another fat kid who can eat the whole time. And Violet is the one who it's like she had the bubble gum, and it's always funny hearing about Violet. 'Cause, Violet, you're turning violet, and I'm like, well, we'll see. But the kids. So, fun fact. I don't know if you know this, but the way that Roe v. Wade actually got passed was because all of the court justices actually sat down and they had a screening of this movie an hour before the vote was being held. So that's actually how Roe v. Wade was passed.
I did not know that. That's insane.
Owen, probably because it's not real. That's not why that happened. You thought I was being for real on that?
I had no idea.
Owen's like, I had no idea that they have movie time before
Yeah, I was
votes
like,
are
I've
being
I've
held
never
on
heard of this.
cases.
I've never
It's
heard of
it's
this.
completely false. But it's
That
just,
makes
in
sense because
my
that would
personal
be
opinion,
absolutely
if I would have
insane.
seen this movie even a week before that vote, I would have been like, yeah, let's pass that bill. Like,
I was gonna
we
say
should
that.
stop these kids from being born into the current society.
I was gonna say that sounds unreal. Like
No, yeah,
it
it's
is
very
unreal.
unreal. Maybe I don't know, but it's very, at least to my knowledge, very unreal. But so the first song I already mentioned it with the Candy Man when they're in the candy store. Two things about this scene. Number one, that is the worst Candy Man in the history of the world. Because let me point out to you something about this movie. He does not charge a single one of those kids for any of the candy they eat within that scene. He is literally throwing marshmallows, lollipops, all sorts of candy, taking the candy dots out of the wall, just ripping it and throwing it. And never once did I see a parent with any actual currency in the store, nor did you see a child give him any currency in exchange for the good. So this is what basically what I'm saying is Willy Wonka is a communist movie where no one has to pay for candy. No, but that scene always made me mad because every time I watch it, the only thing there's two things I always end up yelling. It's like, why are you not charging them? Like this is so much candy to be handing out. The best part of this scene, I don't know if you've ever noticed this. There is a little girl resting her head on the counter, and the candy man, the guy who's working at the candy shop, it's one of those old bars where like you can lift up the wood panel and that's how you walk out into the shop. If you watch closely in this scene, he lifts that wood divider and this little girl goes and she gets hit in the head with the bar opening, and then you see her head like bounce off of it, and then she looks back, and then she just goes behind the bar and continues the scene. So number one, Oscar worthy because she took a hit and kept going. That's an actress right there. Watch her be like the lead character in Dune 3, like she's leading the movie. No longer Timothy Chalamet, they fired him. But she gets hit in the head, keeps going, so she's a trooper. I would hire her again any day. But that's my favorite part about that scene. Um, Before we go into the candy shop, what's the scene in the movie that had like the biggest impact on you as a kid? Because I know from my point of view, like we were poor, but not Charlie Bucket poor. Like, not all my grandparents weren't like living in the same living room, all laying in the same bed, but like we weren't that poor. But what's the scene that stuck with you from pre Chocolate Factory entrance?
Hmm. I don't know. I don't know. Um, Honestly, it's been a minute since I have seen the original movie. I'm more like well versed on the Johnny Depp one. So like I could tell you when we get to that, I could tell you my most impactful scene in that
That's
movie.
fair.
But
I'll tell you, in my personal opinion, there's one that I remember because it makes me angry, and then there's the one that I remember because it scared the crap out of me. So, the one that makes me angry, I already mentioned it. I gave a little prelude, I guess. Grandpa Joe stands up out of nowhere and starts dancing like a buffoon. And like, oh Charlie, we're going to the chocolate factory. Number one, who said you were the one I was gonna pick? Sit down. Like, there's three other grandparents and two parents present. You don't know that you're going. I honestly, if I was Charlie, Grandpa Joe would have been like, "Oh, we're going," and I would have been like, "Oh yeah, I'm taking Dad." And Grandpa Joe's like, "Oh," and I'm like, "You assumed, bro. That's not my fault." The other scene that scared me every time Slugworth was on screen, and they had that music play that was like, "He's a villain," and I'm like, "That's a villain. Like that's Slugworth. You're not supposed to talk to him." Scared me every single time. Also because he just looked scary. I don't know what they did to this man to make him seem scary, or if they just looked at him and they said, "That's a scary looking dude. We're gonna have you play Slugworth," and he's like, okay." I don't even think he was an actor. I think they just saw him on the street while auditions were going on, and they were like, "We're
you.
scared of that. Yeah, we're scared of that guy. You should be Slugworth." Like, he's like, "Who's Slugworth?" And you're like, "Shut up and look at the camera and say what we tell you to say."
So I didn't get the connection between the guy and the new one, and that I did not. That didn't connect with me at all.
So there is a Slugworth in every single Willy Wonka movie that's been made,
Interesting. That is very interesting. I did not know that.
which is funny because in we'll talk. Okay, I'll mention the similarity in a little bit. We'll mention the
Okay, okay,
commonality in a little
okay.
bit. Um, so I think the biggest person we have to talk about in general, their performance in this film is definitely Gene Wilder.
Oh yeah, he's
Absolute acting powerhouse in this
legend.
movie. And I think the best part is because I think people truly forget how horrifying he is in this movie. Like he is not a normal human being for about I would say 80% of this film. He is petrifying.
Yeah.
And like I truly think that people forget how mortifying this would be to a child if it happened to them because like Willy Wonka, Gene Wilder, when they go through the tunnel, he's like, "The walls are closing in and the colors are changing," and all the kids are like, like freaking out, and he's just like, "The world will never be the same," and it's like, I would be mortified as a child. I would have been like, "We need to go." Like we need to get our shoes on and run out that door. Like no, I don't care what the prize is. We are out of here. Like
To
lifetime
that
supply
point,
of chocolate? No.
I was gonna say I've heard from a lot of people, like older than me, people that saw that movie when they were a kid and they were terrified of it. Like
Exactly.
they were afraid of
Because
the
it's
movie.
nightmare fuel. The way he talks about like the, oh, and it's like he looks scary. And I'm like, wow. Like after I rewatched it, I'm like, how was this a kids film?
Yeah,
Like,
I've heard that
granted,
too. I've
it's
heard that
funny
too.
because nowadays we'll watch stuff and I'm like, how is this a kids movie? Like, it's I don't get this. It's like I swear, Scream 7 is just going to be PG-13 because oh, I'm like,
It's a
no,
kids movie.
this is not a kids film. But it's just so funny because when I'm watching it, I'm like, this is not what I thought it was. But yeah, absolute acting powerhouse. And it's funny because as we just said, he was horrifying. And then on the opposite end of that, once you go into the ending of the movie, he is like this beautiful human being. And he like comes out of his shell. Once Charlie sets the gobstopper down, he's just like, Charlie, that was a test. Please forgive me for acting crazy. Like, I had to test you, but you passed. You won. And I'm
Hmm.
like, if I was Charlie, I would have been like, what is happening right now? Like, that man just almost cussed out my grandpa and I over fizzy lifting drink and yelled at me. And he's like, you touched the roof, which now has to be cleaned. And they're like, I'm sorry, man. And Grandpa Joe was ready to snitch. You hear him like he pops in and he goes, we're giving Slugworth that gobstopper. You're a crook. You're a cheat. Charlie won. And I'm like crazy. Like Grandpa Joe, if we get arrested, I know that Grandpa Joe's selling me out because it took 5 seconds and he was like, we're going right to Slugworth. We're going to give him that gobstopper and Willy Wonka's going to lose business. And Charlie was like, Grandpa, like, let's slow down here. Let's give the gobstopper back and let's just go back to our poorhouse. Basically, just our open window. There's no roof or ceiling. It's just an open window with a floor. That's pretty much what. That's what the house is like in the Johnny Depp one, pretty much. But it's like it's funny because he finally gives it back. The test happens, and you're just like, "What is this? This is a totally different guy." And he's just like, "You win, Charlie. You win all of it. It's all yours now." And I'm like, crazy. And I remember like I was talking to someone who was older about it, and they were like, honestly, for some reason, there was like a mania of like, we need to find a chocolatier who's aging. I'm like, well, that would be everyone because we all age. But like, fun fact, we all age, except for Paul Rudd. But like, other than that, it's just so funny because like for us it's like yeah Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or like Willy Wonka, yeah, he's this crazy character, and then people like when this movie came out we're like we need to find a chocolatier, like we golden tickets should be real. And I'm like, okay, that's wild, let's hold on a minute. But yeah, the story pretty cut and dry, everyone knows the story. Charlie, everyone has to look through candy bars. Only a certain amount of kids, like 5 kids, are able to go visit with one parent, which is crazy. I'm like, that's like, at least allow 2 adult representatives. Like, one person to watch a child is a lot. That's crazy. It takes a village to raise one child. Rather than take them to a chocolate factory where they are eating nothing but sugar the entire day, we should honestly have the SWAT team there because those kids would have legitimately devoured all of the fizzy lifting drink, and they literally would have lifted the roof off of that chocolate factory in real life. Like, kids are crazy, and if you give them an ounce of sugar, they are absolute demons. Like, it is Beetlejuice 3, but they're all babies, and it's just crazy. Um, but once they go into the chocolate factory, all of the rotten kids, which sometimes I'll watch it and I'm like, this is like normal kid behavior though. Like, the only kid who won is the one who was too poor to act like a jerk. And I'm like, well, I guess the answer to life is just be poor and you'll be kind-hearted. But it's just funny because it's like all these other ones. I'm like, this is just a kid who wants something. That's just called a kid. Like, kids want stuff. That's just how it is. Like, hey, you
But
got games on your
the
phone?
difference is that he wasn't very greedy, and I think that's because he was poor.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Like, they wanted
So
to make sure no one would sell him out. And I get that. But like,
I
also it's just maybe we should reference the fact that these kids totally died.
oh
Like, there's
yeah,
no way they survived.
no
Fat
way
one literally drowned. He's dead.
in chocolate.
Yes, he's dead. He
Yeah,
drowned.
yeah.
And then Veruca, they made it seem like she dropped 3 feet. They play her voice like, ah.
No,
That
yeah,
was
there's no
like
way.
a Wile E. Coyote fall where you just like hear it go all and you're like they're
Or like
dead.
in
Like
the
that's it.
Star Wars when they play the Wilhelm scream
Yeah,
when
like the
someone's
ah!
falling.
It's
Yeah,
it's
he's
like
gone. He's
Goofy, dude.
gone.
Like, whenever you hear Goofy fall and he's like Ahoo! And he just like fall. That was her, and you just hear like I want it now, and you're like oh R.I.P. Veruca. Like
Her
sorry.
last words are give me my fucking shit right now."
Yeah. I think it's funny because she literally just goes, I want it now. And I'm like, that's me with Amazon though. Like as soon as I order Amazon and the shipping doesn't say tomorrow by 10 p.m., I'm like, should I even order it? Like, why am I ordering this? I should just look locally. And really, that's the answer in general. Shop local. But I'm just so every time I order from Amazon, I'm like, I'm just gonna cancel the order. Like it's I'm just gonna delete everything from the cart. It doesn't say delivered by tomorrow at 10 p.m. We're done. We're done. Like I don't need it anymore, honestly. It's but yeah, it's yes, I have no like purchasing control. But yeah, story pretty cut and dry. Good story. Do you have any last comments on this
I
movie?
actually wanted to go back really quick because you asked me like what the scene
Run
in
it.
the movie that I like hit with me the most, and I
Run it back,
do
King.
I do
Speak
want to
your truth.
say that it had to do with the ending where Charlie won. Like that was very impacting to me. I feel like that made me feel really good. I feel like
See,
um
I'm glad that that was your takeaway because like my favorite scene in the movie is probably the opening with the candy man because it drives me so crazy and I'm like, okay, we're just giving candy away now. Gotcha.
well,
Like
I mean that's kind of
clearly
Willy Wonka's
capitalism doesn't work or else you'd be
that's
charging these kids
that's
for the
kind of
candy.
Wonka's thing though. Is like
Yeah, but he
I
doesn't work for Wonka.
that's
That's what
true.
drives
That's
me
true.
nuts.
That's
He owns
true.
a
It's just a
candy store, which Wonka provides chocolate to, but
it's
it's
just
not
a
a
candy
only
store.
Wonka store.
Yeah.
Also, you want to know what makes me mad? Let's talk about this. This kid at the beginning of the movie, this drives me nuts. This guy goes, and here's the thing. Wonka has a new one for you this morning. It's called a Scrumdiddlyumptious bar. And
Yes.
this kid
Yes.
goes, Scrumbiddlyunctions bar. I'm like, he just said it. He just said the name. And you're already like, a Scrumbiddlyunctions bar. I'm like, you're already ruining it. And he just said the name of it.
You idiot.
He literally goes, this one's called a Scrumdiddlyumptious bar. And I went, oh, a Scrumdiddlyumptious bar. And this kid goes, a Scrumbiddlyumptions bar. I'm like, you know what? You should have fired him.
Take him out. Take him out.
Soon as that kid couldn't say the name, fired him. And they're like, Josh, that's the point. Not in my movie. Get out. Like we'll get another kid who wants to get paid $100 for the day. Which at the time you could buy a Maserati if you got paid $100 for the day.
That
Um,
had to be in the line though. Like that was his line. Like that was what he was supposed
which
to
makes
say.
me angry. And listen, as someone who views all of these movies as like I want this to be realistic dialogue, do you see how old that kid is?
I don't
That kid
remember.
should not be struggling with words he just heard. What does he have? Dementia? The kid looks like 12. And I'm like, he goes, scrum diddly unctions, scrum bibbly unctions. I'm like, and you ruined it. Like, I don't even want to eat the bar anymore. I honestly would have, if I was in that candy shop, I would have rolled my eyes, walked over to the marshmallows. I would have been like, I don't even want to try it anymore. Kid ruined it for me. I would have waited to try the chocolate because I would have been like, he ruined it.
I could see
But
that. I could see that.
that's dude. I'm just saying. It drives me nuts every time. I'm like, honestly, as soon as he messes up the line, I have to like skip 10 seconds forward in the movie. I'm like, we got to skip this, and I got to be able to go forward. Like, let's just move on. Next scene, please. Like, skip. Show me Grandpa Joe. Like, yep. Show me Grandpa Joe lying to his family for 10 years. Let's get there. But yeah, overall, how do you like this movie? You think it's a good movie? You think it's rewatchable?
Yes, I do. I do.
What would you rate it out of 10? Let's go by that.
I would say like 7.5. It's a classic. I feel like it has to get at least
It is
something
a
in that
classic,
range.
yeah.
It's
I
it's
would,
very
yeah,
classic.
I would give it 7 chocolate bars out of 10.
That's good.
Yeah. Once we get to 10, that's where you hit diabetes, though. So it's good we backed off on a 7 because that would have got me. Well, diabetes did get me, but got him. Roasted myself on accident. But the next one we're going to is I'm gonna be hated on the Johnny Depp or the Tim Burton Willy Wonka from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. This movie, as the kids say, is straight gas. This film starts and stops. Honestly, it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. It goes well into the abyss. But like this film, I remember that people will still argue like that movie is so dark. And I'm like, let's hold the phone. Like we all didn't watch the same Gene Wilder
I was
one
gonna
because
say it's a
it
lot
kills me
less
when
dark.
they're like, yeah, Tim Burton, he made Willy Wonka so dark. I'm like, this man
It
was
was dark
screaming at
before.
children in a tunnel about how reality was warping. And
Yes.
you think that they are more messed up by going on an awesome roller coaster ride in a big boat shaped like a candy dragon down a chocolate river? I would have loved that compared to us going through a light tunnel and Willy Wonka making it sound like we're about to get sucked into a polar vortex. Like, I would be mortified at Gene Wilder's, and I would be like moderately suspicious of Johnny Depp. But
Yeah,
this
I
is
don't.
also where this movie changed because it focused on Wonka more than Charlie. Because the first one, it's mostly the story of Charlie and the kids going through the factory. This one, we still have that. But we also get glimpses into, like, Willy Wonka as a child and, like, why he became Willy Wonka, how he made some of the chocolate, or, like, where he got some of the exotic flavors. So what did you think of, like, the Wonka backstory of, like, the dentist?
I thought it was awesome, and I have to say I loved Christopher Lee as his dentist. That was amazing. That was so amazing.
No son of mine is going to be a chocolatier.
That was so awesome.
Let me tell you, as a kid, number one, obviously, like I would say I'm well spoken, and that has stuck with me since I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I was watching this movie and I was like, I cannot believe that his father does not enjoy chocolate. And like that's such a kid thing to say because as you get older, you're like, yeah, maybe I should eat less chocolate or I'll like die because I need to be healthy.
Damn it.
But it's funny because like, as a child, I'm like, chocolate's amazing. I don't know how that dad couldn't like it. Like it's if I could have a chocolate waterfall in my living room, I'm 24 and I would still have it. My cats would die, so I can't. But like I would definitely still want a chocolate waterfall in my house. I still that's a dream of mine. But yeah, having his dad be a dentist was probably the funniest choice of the movie, especially when they have to make up at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I've never been a fan of. Okay, so I'm going to word this in the weirdest way possible. But number one, anybody who I have to pay to explore the inside of my mouth, no. Like, why? Why? I don't even want you in there and I have to pay you? No. But it's just funny because even at the end, when he goes, "Wow, your teeth, these are excellent," and I'm like, "What?" And he goes, I learned it from you, Pop." And I'm like, "This got out of hand." But I did end up liking the backstory. As a kid, I'm like, "Dude, get back to the chocolate." But as an adult, I'm like, "Why am I crying?" Like, it's like probably because of my daddy issues. But it's just funny because like him having father issues, you're like, yeah, that makes sense why he would become a chocolatier. Like, rebel against my dad, who's a dentist. Yeah, if my dad was a dentist, I would probably eat a crap ton of chocolate too. And my dad would probably scold me in front of the fire while throwing all my chocolate into the fire as well. I don't know if dentists are that extreme
No,
nowadays,
they're
but
not.
they're probably like, hey, you can have chocolate, just eat less of it. Meanwhile, back then, he's like, if you have one Mars bar, you will die. And Willy Wonka's like, I'm gonna eat all of the taffy in the frickin' candy shop. Like, I
So
am going to rip this apart.
I just remember my dad. I watched it with my dad, and he's like, "That guy. Do you know who that guy is?" And he's like, "That's Count Dooku." And I was like, "Yeah."
Humble brag there with I got to watch it with my dad. Thanks, Owen. No,
Sorry,
I'm
sorry,
kidding.
bro.
No,
Sorry,
I'm
bro.
just kidding. I'm kidding. But yeah, it is funny because it's like I also there's nothing behind me that shows it right now, but also a huge Star Wars fan. And I remember like as a kid you watch it and you're like, wow, that guy sounds scary. And I remember I told my mom like this sounds like the priest from Corpse Bride, and I was
It
right.
is.
But
It is.
yeah, I was right. So I was like, smart child. But it was very funny because I go back and watch it, I'm like, this is Count Dooku. I'm like, this is so cool. But yeah, I really did love the choice of Christopher Lee, and at the end where they're so awkward together, that was so funny. Where
It
he's just
was.
like they just like shook hands, and I'm like, and he like took off his glove and he like hugged him, and Willy Wonka's like, I don't know what to do right now. Like I've never been hugged before. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Also love how they're like, oh, you have to forgive your father. That was straight up child abandonment. Like, can I just point that out? He literally cut. He cut. It was the worst version of childhood abandonment too, because he literally leaves, goes to the mall, to the chocolate shop, comes back, and his father's entire business slash house has legitimately been removed and is just not there anymore. And the best part of the end of the movie is I don't know where they are. It looks like the middle of Antarctica, which cannot be good for business. And it's legitimately just that same house plopped to where he wanted to move it. And I'm like, what an interesting way to show that the dad moved. Like, let's just move the whole house. We're just going to take it right out of the row, which is not how houses work in urban environments,
I
but
wish it was.
that would be crazy. But like, if one day I'm like, oh, I want to move, yeah, can we pick this up? Like, we gotta put
Yeah,
this on wheels. I'm
I
gonna
really
pull it on
like
the
this
trailer.
house. I really like this house. I don't want to sell it. I want to keep it, but I want to move it somewhere
Yeah, I
else.
want to keep it, but also I want to live in Brazil. So we're gonna have to put this thing on a boat and get it over there. But just yeah, I just thought that was crazy. That was the most like in modern terms, that was the most Kendrick Lamar reaction to like, oh, my son says he's gonna leave. Well, I'm gonna steal the house so he can't come back to anything. I'm like, okay, clocked that. Like, you were
Okay,
angry,
but
understood.
there are also a lot of like crazy things in that movie that like you would never see in real life. Like the elevator that goes like fucking
Well, yeah, but I mean, just come on. Like, listen, yes, elevators that can fly, I get that, Owen. But child abandonment is real.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
that's a
Yeah,
real thing.
that's true.
But the way that they do it in this movie is so funny. Like,
Yeah.
they're just like, I'm taking the house. And usually, like, that's said in a divorce, not like a kid saying, I'm going to run away and eat chocolate. And the dad's like, okay, I'm going to steal your house. Like, everyone, let's move it. And Willy Wonka comes home, and you can see as a kid, he's like, oh my God. Like,
The house is gone.
where's the house? Where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to live? So, like, honestly, I'm glad that they only showed us Willy Wonka pre abandonment and then, like, post childhood.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, there's a rough couple of years in there And I'm kind of glad we didn't explore them, so this movie didn't get too sad. But like, and then it shows him how he discovered the Oompa Loompas, which is hilarious because him having to eat that green slop still disgusts me when he crushes up all the bugs. I still want
Hmm.
to throw up. It makes me
Yep.
gag every time because, ugh, just seeing it. Ugh. And it's so funny because he literally just makes the dumbest noises in this movie. And as a child, it's hilarious. As we grow up as children, we're like, oh, possibly moderately racist. But as like a kid, you're like, oh ha ha, like the Willy Wonka man literally did like and like making funny noises and like doing the hand symbol and stuff and like doing the armpit noise. And then he's just like, would you all like to work for minimum wage in my chocolate factory doing something that you don't even know what you're doing? And all of them were like he
Yes.
legitimately recolonized an entire people. He moved an entire race into a chocolate factory. And that's crazy to me. But I also so he discovered the Oompa Loompas and then they move in with him. How do you view the Oompa Loompas in this movie compared to the ones from the first?
I thought they were a lot more goofy, and I loved it. I love that part of it. It's very goofy, and I don't know.
I
It
always
gets me every
related to the
time.
Oompa Loompas because especially after like Homeboy's drowning in the background and they're like, "What are we gonna do?" And then in the corner you hear like Oompa Loompa, Oompa Loompa, Oompa Loompa, the Loompa Loompa, and they're just
Yeah.
like, "Wait, what's going on over there?" And you see these workers like,
These fucking
and they're like
small,
dancing, and
small orange guys.
they do a whole musical number. And like I'm not talking like the original where it's like the oompa loompa doopa dee doo. Nah, homeboys are doing backflips. They had
Yeah.
synchronized swimming in the chocolate
Yes, they had
river.
the swim caps
Yeah,
on.
they had the swim caps and then they all dove in. And they were also like literally lining the chocolate factory. They were standing on the hills. They were standing like down on the machines. They were standing in the chocolate waterfall. And they were like everywhere. Homeboy's drowning in the background. They're like popping it. They're popping and locking in that movie. And kids still drowning. And we just forget about it for like 3 minutes because the song's going on. I'm like, but I will tell you, if a song is that good, Danny Elfman, you literally have me ignoring a child drowning because your song is so good. That's me when Fiend comes on. Like I hear like Fiend, 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 and I'm like, oh yeah, I was calling the ambulance, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like, oh no, hello. But it's like the fact that we were ignoring a kid drowning because these Oompas were like, what, Augustus Gloop, a great big greedy nincompoop. And I'm like, yeah, he was a nincompoop. Like, I'm on their side as soon as they start spitting bars, is what I'll say, because it was an absolute banger. But yeah, what did you think of the Oompa Loompa songs in this movie?
I thought they were, I don't know if this was intended, but I thought they were hilarious. Like every single one. I was like just laughing at it. Like,
I will agree, and I'll back you up that I think it was intended.
okay,
Because
good.
especially in the third song for Veruca's Salt, because in that song is
I
literally where
turned
they
into
make
it.
it. Yeah, they make it look like the
Yeah.
they have all of them like singing about squirrels
Yeah.
and singing about spoiled kids. And my favorite line in that song. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm weird. I have these songs in my playlist that plays when I'm in the shower because I think they're so good that I legitimately can listen to these songs anytime. Because it's like Faruka Salt, the little brute. But my favorite part
Yes,
of the
yes.
song is the ending where they won the guilty, like trying to see who's guilty for raising Veruca Salt the way she is and allowing her to be a brat. Favorite part is when they went the guilty ones, and this is sad. And then this Oompa Loompa with the deepest voice goes, "Dear old mom and loving
Yes.
dad," and then they kick
Yes.
the dad into the trash compactor. I'm like, that's crazy. Like number one, And then once again, continuing a trend from the Gene Wilder one, they insinuate that he's going to die because they go, "That's okay because the incinerator is only activated on Tuesday." And then the little girl goes, "It is Tuesday." No, the little guy. It was Mike TV because he goes, "It is Tuesday." And
Yeah, the
Willy
guy.
Wonka goes,
He's the guy who was like playing the video games in the beginning. He's
"Yeah."
like, ah, and like
He's just
shooting
like,
people. He's like, I need to kill
"Die,
these people.
die!" And his
Yes,
parents
yes,
are like, "We look terrible
yes,
right now. Like the news is
yes.
here. This is being watched from around the world." Okay, but the character who is the most me, I hate to say it, it's Augustus Gloop in this movie because like he's on the news and he goes, "I love chocolate," and he immediately opens it up like, and he's like eating, and his mom has to take over the interview because he is so enveloped in this chocolate. She literally has to go, "A little Augustus is so obsessed with the chocolate," and his dad's in the back like still being a butcher and like has blood all over the place, and the kid's just and like eating all of the chocolate
It's
in a
all over his
yeah.
face.
I love chocolate. And they're like, homeboy, like them showing the clip of him eating so much and the fact that he didn't realize the funniest part is that he didn't even realize the golden ticket was in there and he took a bite out of
He
it.
took a bite out of it. Yeah.
And he goes and he says before he starts eating the chocolate again, he goes, "This isn't chocolate." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's paper." Like it's not chocolate. Some people look at food before they eat it, and it was just crazy. Which that was the first one. So he starts drowning. Oompa Loompas make fun of him hardcore, and it's hilarious. And then they insinuate his mom is screaming, and also one of the best parts of the movie, he's gonna be chopped up and they're gonna be selling him by the pound around the world. And Willy Wonka goes, no. Like, can you imagine if I sold Augustus Gloop flavored chocolate? Ew, no one would buy it. And I'm like,
Yes.
that is messed up. Like, but also clocked him on that one. Like, he would taste disgusting. And I was like, come on. Like, that's true, though. Like, it's just, this isn't fresh. We're not cannibals. Like, this is, yes, chocolate is supposed to taste like chocolate, not human being. But it's just crazy that Willy Wonka is so nonchalant about it. But also, I love how, like, in the first movie, it's like they play the little flute, and then the Oompa Loompas show up, and they do the smallest coordinated dance of, like, the
Oompa Loompa.
Oompa Loompa Doopa Dee Doo. And it's like robotic movements. They're like, "I got another," but and I was like, okay. And then in this one, Willy Wonka literally just goes, "Huh, we need an Oompa Loompa." And then 5 seconds later, he looks down and he goes, "Hi there." And he's like talking to an Oompa
Yes.
Loompa, and the Oompa Loompa's like, that's how you know they're making minimum wage. As soon as I saw the Oompa Loompa's face, I'm like, he's not happy. Like, he's having a terrible time here. He's making minimum wage. Plus, they can never leave the factory and do anything. So that's boring. But also, they have a chocolate river that they can apparently swim in. Except, it says can't be touched by human hands. And let me point out, the Oompa Loompas dive into that same chocolate, and they are forming circles
They got
around the
swim
tube
caps on,
that the
like we
kid
said
is stuck in.
before.
They have swim caps, and they are literally doing the backstroke around, and they're like doing the angels. And the kid's sitting in the tube, like, are they dancing? And like just watching these Oompa Loompas taunt the tube to force him into the chocolate. And it's like, what's going on? But the other best part is once he goes like, "Wow, wasn't that fun?" And like the snooty dad goes, "I think that was rather rehearsed." And he just goes, "Poppycock." But so, what did you think of the sequence for Augustus Gloop?
Um, I want to go back really quick. I was
Go
gonna
for it.
say you said that they insinuated that these kids all died.
And
I
then at the
always
end, yes, they did show that they were
okay.
alive.
I was gonna say I thought that at some point he says like they're gonna be fine. Like everyone's
Well,
gonna
he
be
doesn't.
fine.
Yeah, he doesn't really say that. But at the end of the movie, they show you. Oh, are you talking about this one or Gene Wilder?
This one.
Okay, yeah, this one at the end they show all of the kids leaving.
Okay, okay, yeah.
And
So
which was traumatizing because Mike TV is like 7 feet tall at the end of the movie because they
yes,
stretched him
they
out on a
stretched him
Laffy
out.
Taffy
Yeah.
pulley, but also like weight loss legend. So I was like, listen, if I can get on that Laffy Taffy pulley, y'all better be doing God's work. Like
So
let's get rid of this.
I thought they mentioned like some of the, at least for Violet and for Mike, that they
They
would be
do.
fine.
They mention it, but they also say that like, hey, these kids are going to be messed up. So
Oh
that's why
yeah,
Violet, when she leaves, I think she's still Violet.
blue.
She's
Yeah,
still
she's
blue,
still yeah.
but she's also like super acrobatic. And like
Yeah.
she like twisted her head up under her legs, and I'm like, what's going on? Like as a kid, I was like, people do this? And then when Mike TV, like Augustus is just covered in chocolate, and I'm like, yeah, that matches.
Yeah.
The rich Veruca and her dad are covered in trash, and he's like, I am never buying you anything ever again. Pretty much like
Yes.
I'm putting you up for adoption as soon as we get home. And they're covered in trash. And then Mike TV's dad walks out with his jacket, and he looks at the jacket, and you see him look up, and you're like, what's he looking at? And then when Wonka's in the elevator, they show the kid, and he's like 7 feet tall, and he looks like a freaking skinwalker. I'm like, what is
Yeah.
happening? Like, Flat Stanley just walked out of the freaking chocolate factory. And I can only imagine, it never shows us, but the reactions from the press had to have been dumbfounding because it shows at the end of the movie the press is all still waiting outside to see what the experience was like, and here comes a fat kid covered in chocolate, a girl who is literally blue, looks like a circus freak, putting her head under her legs and doing like 20 backflips down the stairs, a girl and her dad covered in trash, and a kid who's like 7 feet tall who was like 5'4" when he walked in. I can only imagine the press is like, what happened in there? Like, honestly, they probably wouldn't even ask. Though, honestly, we can take a guess from here. Like, I think we can guess what happened. Augustus fell in chocolate. I don't know what this chick did, but she's a blue acrobat now. And it's like crazy. But yes, they do show that the kids are still alive.
Yes. So back to what you were saying about how people are saying this movie is so dark. I was gonna say, this movie is definitely a lot more lighthearted than the original because you have no idea what happens to those kids in the original, and I
Yeah.
just
In the
assume that they
original,
are
they're just
dead.
like, well, bye.
Yeah,
Charlie wins.
I just assume that they're all dead. But in the new one,
Yeah.
in the
And
new
then they took
one,
their parents out back and they shot them too.
yes, yeah,
Yep.
or I should say in the remake, yeah,
Yeah. It's
but
listen, it those Oompa Loompas honestly are like my favorite part of the movie. Just because like I didn't realize how small they were. And then they show so many height comparisons in this movie, and it makes it so funny. Because like the fact that these Oompa Loompas are legitimately like the height of two water bottles is crazy. Like they're so tiny.
like this, maybe
Yeah,
like
it's
this.
it's even better because when he does like, hey, I want you to take Mrs. Gloop and go poke around the chocolate till you find
Yeah,
Augustus. And he
yes,
literally grabs a piece of her dress and starts leading her away. And I'm like, number one,
yes.
hope you don't have Oompa Loompa HR on that one because you're in trouble. Like, clock that punishment. And yeah, I'm like, yeah, you might want to watch out. You might want to call the lawyer on that one. But what did you think of the Augustus Gloop sequence?
Okay, so I thought as a kid watching it, I felt bad for him. I was like, this kid, he's just going up that tube. He was not meant for this. Like,
You were a
but
nicer kid than I was.
yeah, I don't
I
know. But
was at
then
home like, and that's what you get. Like,
that's what
that's
you
why you
deserve.
don't act like that.
You get what you deserve.
I was talking like a 40-year-old at home. I'm like, and that's why you shouldn't act like that, kid. Like, that 40-year-old New Jersey guy, like, and that's why you don't act like that.
I honestly didn't really understand the premise of the movie the first time I watched it. Like I got it, I get it now, of course, but like I did not understand it watching. I mean, granted, I was 4 years old when that movie came out. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, 2005.
Yeah, yeah, I was four. I was
Yeah,
four. I saw
I
the
was
movie was
5.
that.
So yeah, I was 5. So clearly much more mature than you as a 4-year-old. But I was levels above, really. But moving on, this is where we get to Violet Beauregard, which number one, they didn't have to go as hip hop as they did on this one, but they did, and it's still a banger. Like this song, honestly, if you played it at a nightclub, I feel like everyone would go crazy nowadays. Like they might not, they might be confused at first, but with the beat in the background, they'll catch up. Like don't worry, they'll catch up, and they'll throw that thing in a circle if this song comes on. At least I will. I don't care if I'm the only one in the club. I'm like Tina and Bob's Burgers. I'm throwing that back. Like it's happening. Like I'm gonna move it and like full Tina mode. But this song is a banger, and my favorite part is that they literally jump off of her to perform like cheerleading stunts during the song. And I'm like, listen, I get that she's like filled with juice right now, but she can still feel that. Like,
Yeah.
you are kicking this girl, literally kicking her while she's down in the movie. And we watch it happen and we're like, yo, like, do more tricks, do a barrel roll. And they're just like damaging this poor girl. But how did you like this sequence?
Um, I liked it a lot. I did. It was funny. It was well done. It was funny.
My favorite is when Willy Wonka literally makes the whole piece of gum, and he goes, here's this piece of gum, and they go, oh, can I have it? And he goes, no one can eat it. And he's like, I made this gum, but no one can eat it. And they're like, but why though? And he's like, because I said so though. And then of course the girl doesn't listen. I'm the world bubblegum champion. Puts it behind her ear, which number one, still gross that you're putting bubblegum behind your ear so you can
Yeah,
eat other snacks.
she took the one out of her mouth and put that behind her ear, and then it
Yeah.
took the stuff
And then she
instantly. Go
yeah,
ahead.
she was speaking to Charlie Bucket like he was an idiot because he goes, "Why not just start a fresh piece?" Which is normal if you have been chewing gum for that long. And then she goes, "Because then I'd be a loser like you." I'm like, "Okay, but like who is proud to have a statue of chewing bubble gum?" Like once you grow up, she would have been like, "Wow, this is the most trivial statue I have." Like I literally have a Nobel Peace Prize, but here I guess I'll display this statue of me chewing bubble gum. And the statue was literally just a pair of teeth with a gumball in it. I'm like, that's not even a cool looking statue.
So you know how I said I felt bad for the kids? This
Yeah,
is the girl that I felt the least bad for. There was no reason for her to say that to Charlie. Like he was the
yeah,
nicest kid ever, and
you're right.
she's just like, I hate you. Like you suck. You're a loser.
I I do love how number one, this movie single handedly defeated what's known as the sisterhood, because the two girls that get invited to the chocolate factory immediately clock each other, say that they're going to be best friends, and when they turn, their faces immediately reflect that they do not trust each other and they want to beat the other one. So they immediately go into a competitive mode, and I'm like, yeah, sisterhood went out the window as soon as the coats came off. Sisterhood left. It was gone.
Yeah.
Because she literally goes, "Let's be friends," and she replies, "Best friends," and they turn forward and they literally do one of these. And I'm like, wow, like immediate shift in tone. And it was so funny because like this is when also the kids are all trying to like riz up Willy Wonka. So they're like, "Give me the prize." Like
Oh yeah.
I chewed bubblegum and he went, "Great." And like keeps going.
Yeah.
And then she goes, "Hi, Mr. Willy Wonka. It's a pleasure to meet you." And he like, "My name's Veruca Salt." And he like, she holds out her hand to meet him, and he immediately starts roasting her. I always thought a Veruca was a type of wart you get on your foot, and then just walks off again. And then the best one, Augustus Gloop. Oh, Mr. Wonka, I love your chocolate. And he already has chocolate all over his face and all over his hands. And Willy Wonka does I can see that, and keeps walking. I don't know why. Like in the original, Gene Wilder had some funny jokes that he said. They're like, "Oh well, like oh," and he goes, "Oh no, no, house rules." And then like one of them, they're like, "Someone call the police!" And Gene Wilder goes, "Help, police, danger." And so like he was funny, but in this one, he wasn't like he roasted the parents a little bit, but he was straight dogging these kids. Like,
It's
but
almost
Veruca's
like
like, "Nice to meet you," and he's like, "You're named after a wart." And then the girl chewing bubblegum, he's like, "Okay, we're done." And then Augustus comes up and he goes, "Wow," like just roast all of them. And then it's funny because he turns around, also makes fun of Charlie, and Charlie hadn't said anything yet. He turns around, he looks at Charlie, and he goes, "And you're just happy to be here." And I'm like, okay, he's nice, but I was so nervous he's about to roast him. Because, and then he looks at Mike TV. He looks at Mike TV first and he goes, "You're the little devil that cracked the system." And I'm like, why are we acting like this kid is Sherlock Holmes? Like, you're the one who cracked the code to the golden tickets. And they did, like, Mike TV in the original was like, Cowboys and Indians. Mike TV in this one was like, he just hacked the Matrix. He was like, I went into the mainframe in Wonka's system and I was able to find all five of the tracking numbers that was on the golden ticket. And I'm like, what? Like, you, huh? And it's funny because Charlie's just like, I found a bill in the snow and I was able to buy a chocolate bar with it, and that's how I got the golden ticket. So Willy Wonka just goes, "You're just happy to be here." And he's like,
so
"Yeah, pretty much."
it's funny you say that. I feel like he knew who was gonna win already in the beginning of the movie. Like he knew that it was gonna be Charlie. He had to have because all the other ones were spoiled brats, and he was the only one who didn't say anything.
It's funny because he says it at the end, but right after saying something else that made it feel like he was surprised. Because like we'll get to that later. We'll come back to that. Remind
Okay,
me.
okay,
I'll
okay,
make a note to
okay.
circle back to Charlie winning. But let's move on to Veruca Salt. So Veruca Salt, they go into the giant trash, the nut sorting room, not the trash room, the nut sorting room, where all the squirrels are sorting the nuts. And Veruca wants a squirrel. R.I.P. Peanut. If you know about that, this is the. Don't laugh. This is sad. So the squirrel named Peanut. I'll tell you about it later. But R.I.P. Peanut. Um, in this is the one where she goes, "I want a squirrel," and the dad goes, "How much for a squirrel, Mister Wonka?" And he goes, "Oh, they're not for sale." And I'm like, immediately, yes. Set a boundary. Tell the kid no. She needs it. And she goes, "Daddy, I want a." It's the equivalent. It's the equivalent of the "do the roar" kid. Like legitimately, that it's that again, but like, oh, gross. But and then Johnny Depp doing the best impression of this guy. "I'm sorry, darling. Mr. Wonka's just being unreasonable." And then she just crawls through and walks up to a squirrel. "I want this one." They rightfully remove her from the premises. I will say it's slightly extreme, with 90 squirrels carrying her to a garbage chute, but they removed her as she should have been removed. And the whole time, they are pressuring Willy Wonka to find the right key to open the gate. And we all know that they could have jumped right over that gate, walked down the stairs, and grabbed that child. And they never did it. They just sit there and they wait. I'm not kidding. They go, and I'm like, no action is being taken here. Like, obviously, Willy Wonka's trying to buy time. Like, oh man, yeah, let me try to find this key. I'm not looking for the key. But he's just like trying. And then, right when she gets kicked down the chute, he goes, "Oh my god, my daughter's gone." And he immediately opens the door and he's like, "Oh, I found it." And I'm like, we all know, Willy. Like, we get you. Song starts. They basically just trash talk the dad and mom the entire time, as they should. And it's funny because I think they were so petty in this scene because obviously they kick the dad into the trash. Before they do that, they throw an entire portrait of the mother into the trash as well. And I'm like, wow, y'all went out of the way to dog the mother who wasn't even there. You were like, nah, we're going to include her. Like, we're going to roast all of them, and she's included. Like, she was in the wrong. But what? do you remember about this scene? Or like what stuck with you the most as a child watching this?
Real quick, can I go back?
Go
I was
for
gonna
it.
ask you a question. It was the squirrels, correct? That dragged her into the trash chute?
Yes. So the
Okay.
squirrels, they climb on her and then they all climb under her and
Yes.
lift
And
her
then
up and walk
yes.
her right into the trash chute.
Yes. So I feel like the reason they didn't find the key is because they were just waiting for this. They knew the squirrels were gonna do that. Like they knew they're like this isn't part of like they don't. This isn't in our habitat. Like she should not be here. They're like take her, push her out, get her out of here.
Which is like I feel like that's how cats feel about their owners. Like, oh, like fancy you're here, like this is our realm. And I'm like, yeah, like that's my cats to me. I walk in and they all try to carry me back out of the house. They're like, no, go back. Like,
The cat.
leave.
Well, the cat thing
And
is
then they
like
get hungry and they're like, no, come back. And then I
they
come back and feed them and they're like, okay, you can leave again. Like,
usually cats like are like you're part of our colony. Like you're here, and
squirrels, get out.
so they should have
You're getting
known
between me and that nut, and you're
instantly.
out.
Instantly, Veruca and her dad should have known. You can't
They swiped
domesticate it.
left.
You can't domesticate a squirrel. You can't take a squirrel out of its habitat and say like, "Oh, you're mine now." Like squirrels aren't pets for a reason, lady. Like
Have you ever heard of rich people before? Because
I
just to
have.
point out, we have two entire documentaries about people owning exotic animals, and I would also like to point out that it never ends well. Ask Carol Baskins how her tiger farm is going. Ask Joe Exotic, and then also we had that one about chimpanzees, and I swear, like they just had one about like, there's so many exotic animals, and I'm like, listen, just don't own one. Like, if you
Yeah,
do and it's doing fine, I guess we'll check in a couple of years. But, like, just don't do it. Don't
yeah,
think that you're that person who is like, oh, I'm Dr. Doolittle. Like, I can communicate with them because you can't. But I do love that it was just like, oh, I want a squirrel. And then they legitimately carried her to the trash and they said, you're done. Like, it's even funnier because the scene that, like, kind of scared me as a child is when she goes to grab the squirrel and the squirrel goes, and, like, does a little jump scare before jumping down to run at her. Because he's, like, standing there and he's, like, looking at her and then he goes, and then he
yeah. He's
jumps
like,
down.
"What
And
is
I
this?"
was, as a kid, I was just like, hey, wait a minute. Like, no.
He's like, "What is this thing in my territory? Get
Yeah,
out of my
it's
territory!"
almost like, do you remember that really old YouTube video where it's like, dun, dun, dun? And it was like
Yes.
that gerbil? That's what it was. I feel like they recreated that before that was even that popular on YouTube. But it was so good. And then last but not least, we get to Mike TV. So in this point, I'd also like to wrap it up on one big thing where Danny Elfman worked on this soundtrack. If you, for anybody who might listen, or even if you, Owen, don't know who Danny Elfman is per se or all of his background, Danny Elfman collaborates and has collaborated with Tim Burton many of times on his most popular films. He did the soundtrack for Beetlejuice. He did the soundtrack for Batman 1989. And Batman Returns. He did the soundtrack for Corpse Bride, Nightmare Before Christmas, where he was also the singing voice of Jack Skellington. And he also voiced multiple voices in that movie. He sang for Bone Jangles in Corpse Bride and did multiple voices in that movie as well. He has partnered with him on so much, and he was also in the band Oingo Boingo. So he was best known for that as well. So Danny Elfman, or as I like to refer to him, the coolest man alive, is awesome. He's tatted up. He is a goth king. He is fantastic. So I wanted to touch on, like, as we get into Mike TV, the last kind of song in the movie, I wanted to touch on how Danny Elfman did with the soundtrack. Which, number one, I think just from the opening scene of all the, like, us seeing how the chocolate is being made and packaged, and, like, how Wonka's just throwing the golden tickets down on the five. I think that Danny Elfman absolutely rocked the house with this soundtrack. I think not only did the music perfectly fit the movie, but as you said earlier, the comedy of the Oompa Loompa songs, I think, enhanced this movie to a degree hitherto undreamt of. Like, it was legitimately just, it made this movie so good. It's just an added layer of awesomeness on top of an already good movie. So I just wanted to, what is your thoughts on like how he did on this music, or what's like your favorite of the four core songs of these kids being brutally almost murdered, attempted murder, did you appreciate the most?
First of all, I was going to say I did not know that, and that is very interesting, and it makes me want to go back and watch all those movies that you mentioned.
He
And
did
like
all of those.
knowing,
Isn't that
knowing,
crazy?
yes, knowing that, it makes me want to go back and rewatch them even more.
Do you want to know a movie I did not list? He did not partner with Tim Burton on this movie, but a movie that you know that he did the entire soundtrack for.
Tell me.
Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man.
Oh my gosh, that
He's the
changes
one who
everything.
wrote that soundtrack for the first movie. I think he did the second one. He did not do the third. But I think that he did the first two. So, like, that original Spider-Man theme of Tobey Maguire, Danny Elfman
Yes,
wrote that.
I love that. I love that. That's
I
awesome.
knew you would know that because I
Yes, I
I
do know
know
that
that one
theme.
of the Funko Pops behind you is Spider-Man. It's not Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, but I know that I know how you are with Spider-Man. So I was like, you're gonna appreciate this actually. But yeah, I thought you would appreciate that, so I wanted to
Yes,
bring
I
that up.
do. I do really appreciate that. That's awesome. And I do feel like this was like really good. I was actually going to get to my favorite musical sequence in the whole movie is the Mike TV one. My
Yep.
favorite one. So,
Also, so my type of comedy, I love doing voices. As you know, I will do them even when they're bad. I do not care. I love doing voices. I'm a freak like that. I'm a freak. But it's so funny because my favorite voices in this movie aren't like the super high pitched ones, but like the super low ones.
yeah.
So in the Mike TV one, my favorite, but if he can't, and then the guy goes, that serves him right, and he like squashes him with the notebook, still like my favorite part of that sequence.
Yeah.
Obviously, like the Beatles reference, and like they have a reference like rock and roll, and he like it's so good. And they're like flipping through all the channels, and ugh, beautiful.
Yeah, that was my
Um,
favorite. My favorite.
my favorite, I won't lie. So I'm gonna give you a little Josh history too. So you know me very well. Like I hope you do at least, being
I
a
do.
brother. But you know me pretty well, and it's so funny because when I was a kid, so every all of my babysitters as well as my mother, I wouldn't say hate this movie, but they definitely don't want to watch it anymore because I made them watch it all the time. And the thing about me is if there's a dance I want to learn or if there's like a song I want to learn, the way I learn it is by listening to it repeatedly as long as I need to until I memorize it. And when I tell you that my mom, there's most likely a clip out there somewhere. I'm not sure. I'll have to try to find it. But there is a clip of me as the movie would play, I would do all of the Oompa Loompa dances along with them. Like, obviously, I'm not jumping into a chocolate river in my living
Doing
room, but
flips and shit.
like, I would literally be doing like angels, and like, I would be like acting like I'm diving in 7 times for to cover all of the Oompa Loompas and stuff. And it was just like, ugh, my poor family and my poor mother. They're like, wow, this is what we raised. Like, terrible. But I would legitimately reenact all of the Oompa Loompa sequences, and my favorite one that like this is how I broke. So I broke the DVD. It will no longer play, and I had to buy a new copy because I ruined it. But I would watch all the way up to the Augustus Gloop part. I would do that whole song, and then that song is such a banger to me that I would rewind it all the way back to the beginning of the song and I'd watch it again. So I would at least watch it twice. I still do that with every watch of this movie. I will rewind and re-listen to the entire Augustus Gloop song at least twice, and that is my favorite one. The Mike TV one, very good. Veruca Salt, second favorite. all of them are good. So I'm definitely not like, oh, this one's bad. But yeah, Danny Elfman, you killed it. But it's so funny because yeah, Augustus Gloop. Of course, me being the fat one, I'm like the Chocolate River. But it's just I thoroughly enjoy that sequence, and I am more than happy to watch it as many times as I need. But so we talked about the music, we talked about Mike TV. Charlie wins. And I made a note that we circle back to Charlie winning because I did make a reference that you mentioned you think that Willy Wonka knew that he was going to win. And he does say that verbatim. So we circle back to Charlie winning, and that is actually where Johnny Depp or Willy Wonka actually mentions he goes like, "Okay, where to next?" And he turns around and it's only Charlie left, and he goes, "Oh, you're the only one left." And then they're like, "Yeah, Charlie's the only one left." And then he like takes a second to process that information, and then he runs up and he starts shaking his hand. He's like, "Oh my gosh, you did it! I always knew you were gonna win. Oh my gosh, yeah, I always knew it was gonna be you." So it's like weird because it's definitely giving off the vibe like he totally didn't think this kid was gonna win, but it's also giving off the vibe that oh he figured that this kid was gonna win. So it's a mixed bag for me where I'm like, oh yeah, he thought that Charlie was gonna win, but he also didn't. So you were right earlier when you mentioned like, hey, I think he knew that Charlie was going to win based off that one interaction. It's kind of 50-50 because they hint to like he might have known that Charlie was going to win, and then they also kind of back away like maybe he didn't. Maybe he was just going with the flow the entire time.
I think he had a pretty good apprehension that
I
he
think
was
he
gonna
had an
win.
intuition that Charlie was going to win,
Yeah,
and I'm like, yeah, which makes sense. But it's so Charlie wins. They take the elevator and they crash it through the glass ceiling, which is wild. Which honestly, this scene is very comparable to when Gene Wilder is in the tunnel, like we're gonna die. Like this
yes,
is he's literally in the elevator, like, "Yep, we're going up," and I'm like, "Yeah, we can see that.
yeah, like 100 miles
Yeah,
an
we can
hour.
tell that. Yeah." So it's hilarious because I'm just like, I once again, I'd be mortified. And they go to Charlie's house where Willy Wonka. Number one, they crash through the roof and ruin the home of this already poor family, which they can definitely not let. I'm never gonna financially recover from this. They are not. They will never be able to patch that roof, and they will die from the cold. But he crashes through. He shows him like he sees the Willy Wonka build that Charlie made out of the little like toothpaste caps. And then he goes, "What if I'm going to live in the chocolate factory? Can I bring my family?" And they make it seem like Willy Wonka's going to be cool with it. He goes, "Ah, don't be silly. Of course you can't." And you're like, "What?" And he's like, "No, you can't do all this work if you have a family bogging you down. Like, I didn't have any family, and look how great I am." And everyone's like, "Yeah, you are mentally disturbed. Like you have problems, my son." And so Charlie turns him down, which surprises him. So Charlie won, but he declined the offer, and then Willy Wonka just leaves. He bounces out. End of the movie shows us that Oompa Loompa is cutting his hair, which is hilarious because he has a very similar bowl cut to what Lloyd has in Dumb and Dumber, and I think that's funny for like the whole movie. And he has a bob. That's what it is. He doesn't have a bowl cut. He has a bob, and that's even funnier.
Yeah, it goes to like
Um,
right
he
here.
cuts the hair and he finds a gray hair, and he's immediately like, "I'm gonna die. I'm getting old. Someone needs to run this factory." And I'm like, "That's crazy," but also understood. If you wondered why I shaved my beard, it's because there was a gray hair in there. No, but it was no. I'm just kidding. But I just thought it was funny because he also goes to the shoe shine. He's trying to be like undercover with Charlie when Charlie's like shining shoes. And he goes like, "What did you think of Willy Wonka?" And he's like, "I thought he was a bit rude." And he like rips that newspaper down and he's like, "I was not." And he was just like immediately starts defending himself. And Charlie's like, "What are you doing here?" And the two funniest gags in the movie are when Willy Wonka turns around and then he rams his face right into the glass elevator. There are no scenes that I laugh at more than those scenes where he runs into the elevator because he goes like, "Oh my gosh, I knew you were gonna win. I knew you're," and you hear the bonk and he just falls backward, and I'm like, "Yup, comedy, peak physical comedy right there." And it's even funnier when he does it at the shoe shine because there are more people around to witness it. So you see people in the background like turn around and they're like, "Oh, he fell." And then they just go on with their day. They're like, "Who cares? I don't even know who that is." And they get in the elevator, which is hilarious to say. They fly to what looks like the middle of Alaska. It's honestly, it looks like the middle of the ocean when it's froze. Like it's just ice. And they walk up, and it's the dentist office. So they're visiting his father, because as we learn throughout the movie, he has daddy issues. Join the club, Willie. But it's just so funny because he's like, "Let's go meet my dad," and he gets his teeth checked out. We find out that he has great molars, apparently, and he's like, "Yep, just like you taught me, Pop." And Christopher Lee is like, "Willie." He gets like all emotional and he goes, "Dad." Johnny Depp's voice in this movie kills me. But just like, "Dad." And they hug, make up of literal child abandonment. And we cut back to, I guess, now that Willy Wonka accepted his family, he finally allows Charlie to have his family, which this is what I think is the most messed up about this movie. I know that like Charlie and his family are not greedy. You're going to tell me that Willy Wonka could not pay to have a new house built that isn't that rundown shack. Instead, he chooses to have that rundown shack moved into the chocolate factory. Why? That's my biggest question. Why? This man could pay an obscene. This man built a complete palace out of chocolate. That's how rich he is. And as soon as Charlie is like, "Can I move in with my family?" Willy Wonka said, "Yes, but you have to continue living in the slums. We're just going to move the slums into the chocolate factory." Crazy to me. Crazy. What are your thoughts?
So I always just assumed that they were like he would have enough money after taking over the chocolate factory to move his family out of the slums. I just kind of assumed that at the end of the movie. I don't know.
No, but like, so what I'm saying, he does move his family technically out of the slums. They move into the chocolate factory. But instead of like giving them new rooms or building them a nicer house in the chocolate factory, they move that same rundown house that they were living in on the outside. They move that into the factory.
Yeah, so I just assumed that eventually they just bought a new place after that. Like it was just temporary. That's what I assumed.
I see the way I read it was that they had been living there for a while because they make it seem like Willie has been part of the family for a little bit at that point, and it kills me because I'm like, this is such like this is the pettiest thing. Like, oh, instead of allowing you to not be poor anymore, I'm actually going to bring a constant reminder of your struggles for like 20 years
Yeah, that makes no
into
sense.
the chocolate factory. Like, that's the worst idea ever.
It really
Just build
goes.
a new house or maybe live in one of the thousands of rooms that we saw in the chocolate factory.
Yeah, and it really goes against like the whole concept of the whole movie. Like the whole point is
Yeah.
like be
Hey, he gets
kind,
to
raise your
stop
kids
being
well.
poor. And then the end of the movie is like, well, actually, he has to continue living in this rundown house while also working out of a multi-billion-dollar functional factory where he makes chocolate and he is taking over a company from the richest person on the planet in this universe.
Well, the thing is, like, if you were taking over the richest chocolate factory in the world, you're gonna make a lot of money, and you're gonna have to you have that money to do whatever the fuck you want with it, and they could just buy a new place at that point.
That's listen, that's like me if I took over Tesla tomorrow. Elon
Yeah, but I'm
Musk,
saying
Elon Musk on
eventually.
Mark to be the richest man in the world. He's already the richest man. He's going to be the world's first trillionaire. Let's say I take over Tesla and SpaceX and I take over as Elon Musk, which he would not like me, but
You
I
forgot
let's
about
say I
X.
take over by like that's not profiting much. So let's just say there's no ads. But let's just say that I take over for Elon Musk. And instead of me moving into a nicer house, I just keep living where I'm living. But
You'd
I
save a
move,
lot of money.
but almost like what they did in this movie, where Willy Wonka's dad just removed their house from the block. Imagine that I literally just airlifted my home to Los Angeles, California. Like, what? That's not making sense here. Like, this is not it. One of these things is just not they're not fitting the mill. Like it's just not happening.
The thing
But
is the movie is very out there. Like it's very like extraordinary. Like it's everything in the movie that would never happen in real life. Like so, I mean, it kind of fits in.
that's very fair. But it's like it's just so funny.
It is
But
funny. It is
okay,
funny.
so that's that whole movie. So what would you rate this movie?
I gotta say, at least 8.5 out of 10 because I fucking love that movie.
Respect, and I concur. This is my hot take, my favorite movie with Willy Wonka in it.
Yeah, yeah, I gotta agree.
But also, this is leading us into the newest addition to the Willy Wonka cinematic universe, which is what I had just coined it 5 seconds ago. Um, so, this is Paul Muad'Dib, Willy Wonka Atreides, the cinematic universe. So we're going to talk about Wonka, the prequel with Timothy Chalamet, which is crazy that we have a Wonka movie that feels so recent, but also that it came out so long ago.
A
Um,
year ago.
which is forever by today's standards. A year ago, I feel like I lived on a different planet, truly. But so it's kind of like a prequel, but it also seems like its own thing in a way. But once again, one of the best parts of the movie, I think we should jump into the music.
Um,
Obviously, this movie is newer, so the music is very well produced, very it's a little bit more modern, but it also feels like nostalgic at the same time. They mentioned Broadway, so I was immediately like 10 out of 10. You mentioned Broadway in a movie, you win. Like you're it. And what is your favorite song from
I
this movie?
I have to say the chocolate one, like the how does it go?
You've never had chocolate like this?
Yes, yeah, that one. Yeah, I really like that one.
Man after my own taste. That is also my favorite song from this movie. Just because of honestly the scene where they're on the train or the trolley. Let me correct myself.
Yes.
They're on the trolley and they're like, "Oh, did you have Wonka's new chocolate?" And she's like, "No, I have to try it." And he turns around, and I'm like, "Oh, there he is." And number one, he is straight roasting the guy who just proposed, and then she said, "No, I need someone who's going to sweep me off my feet. Is that you?" And he goes, "No, I haven't. I have crippling insecurities." I'm like, clocked that. Apparently, I've met Timothy Chalamet or the director before. I didn't know that I did, but apparently they wrote me into the movie. So thanks for those royalty checks, Timothy. But wait, number he just roasts him. Shows up dressed as a waiter, and I'm like, got it. So we're impersonating service workers. And then immediately jumps into a song like "You're sad, you suck," and like Everyone knows it, and I love how the guy goes, "Have you been following me?
Are you following me?
Have you been following me? Like you're describing my life." And I'm like, Wow." He just admits like, "Yeah, I'm extremely depressed." And he takes a bite of a giraffe macaroon, and in true musical fashion, they burst into song. And they're dancing on the tables, and I love when the lady's like, "He doesn't even work here. Like, get off the
Yeah.
table." And it's like they don't have a problem that they're singing in public. She's like, "Get off the table. Like you can sing, but just not on the table." I'm like, which is fair. That would be a realistic staple in society, I feel. If I stood up on a table in Applebee's and started twerking, everyone would probably be like, number one, you should stop twerking. Number two, why are you dancing in public? She only had a problem with one of those, and it was that he didn't work there. I'm like, okay, interesting. But when they're on the trolley and everyone's doing the Broadway thing, and then he eats a chocolate, and the police chief is like, "Oh," and he hands one to the other police officer, and he eats it, and that guy like hangs out of the trolley, and he's like, "I've never had chocolate like this," and he's like singing all loud, and I'm like. Yes, that is my favorite part of the movie just because I'm like, that's me after eating regular chocolate. I don't even have like any special like giraffe milk or like the
Start
hair
flying.
repair eclair, which now I need one because my mom made fun of me shaving. But I'm just like, dude, yes, that's the best song in the movie. I love it. But we see the return of a classic song. We see Pure Imagination come back, which is obviously a phenomenal song. How did you feel listening to that song again?
It was very nostalgic. I loved it. As soon as I mean, I kind of knew it was gonna play because they played in the beginning. Like they played the tune, like do 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 do, and when it started playing, I was like, this is perfect. Like this movie is a masterpiece. I love this movie. But I was gonna go back really quick. The part that I really liked about the chocolate song was the very beginning where they like he had the flying like the egg chocolates. I That was what got me hooked in the movie. I was like, this is it. I like this a lot. It reminded me very much of the Johnny Depp ones, where like just like this crazy candy that does like magical shit. Like it was awesome.
See, they didn't get me until later in the movie. And that scene is very good. I'll give it to you. But the whole reason I could not focus when that scene started is because it made me think of the TikTok trend. Because there was a TikTok trend where, like, he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is," and then it would switch to Dune, and he would be like, "Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, Duke of Arrakis." So that scene starts playing, and I'm like, I can't take this scene seriously. I have to wait. So that movie did get me hooked, but it was a little bit later than that because I was like, I can't focus. All I'm thinking about is Paul Muad'Dib Atreides right now.
So
Duke of Arrakis.
the reason why is because, well, I mean, the reason, like, a lot of it also goes back to what we were talking about in the Johnny Depp one, where he's going back to like his origin and how he met the Oompa Loompas, and he said that the candy was from Mumbai in the beginning, and I was like, that reminded me of like them showing his backstory in that movie, and I just felt very nostalgic, and I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, I did love that. Like, for they, it was. I hate that when I'm talking about fictional characters, I always tend to say like, yeah, slightly racist. But they're just like the little orange man, and I was like Donald Trump's in this movie. But it was like funny because they're talking about it, and I know who it's going to be, so I'm just waiting for him to show up, and I'm like, where is he? Like, give me the little orange man now. Like I know it's going to be Hugh Grant. Please get me Hugh Grant. And when they're talking about it. From Willy's perspective, it's funny because he shows up and he's like, "Yeah, I found this nut and I took it and I made chocolate." And then from the Oompa Loompas perspective, it's, "You robbed my colony of this nut and
And they
they
kicked me out.
exiled me for it. And now I have to bring back 1,000 chocolates or I can never see my family or my home again. And I'm like, this took a turn.
Yeah, I did not expect
And the fact that
that.
he did the little like Oompa Loompa dance,
Oh yeah.
and it was like, I've already stopped now. I can't stop until the song is finished. And he goes, Oompa
Yes.
Loompa Doopa Dee Doo. And he was like, he was so sassy with it. I'm like, yes. Like, yes. But yeah, it was an amazing callback to the Gene Wilder, and it was very funny.
That was
The
also
flute
very
that he
very
plays,
nostalgic.
like the tuning flute, killed me because I'm like, number one, that's clearly from the original film, but also
Hmm.
because I have it as a text tone. I don't. It's not my current text tone. That would be Darth Vader breathing. But I do have it as a text tone, and I use it as an alarm of where it's like, and it's like the like quick little flute, and it's I have that as an alarm to like wake me up for work. So it's very funny. I watched it and I'm like, oh, I literally hear that every single morning at 5:30 to wake me up to go to my job. But I thought that was super funny. Loved the Oompa Loompa. Timothy Chalamet. What did you think?
I thought he did a great job, like way better than I expected going into watching the movie. Like I didn't think he could do Willy Wonka that well. Like he was Willy Wonka. He had an immaculate performance. Like did not expect that. So good.
The only exposure I had to I had very weird Timothy Chalamet exposure because I had seen the first Dune and I had seen the Statistics music video. I had seen him dancing in high school, talking about being a white rapper, which sit down. Eminem was here first. But being Michigan born and raised, I have to mention Eminem at some point. But yeah, I had weird exposure to him, so I was like, I don't know how I feel about the whole like Willy Wonka thing because I had just never seen that type of performance from him yet. And it was hilarious because apparently the director was like, yeah, I saw videos of him dancing in high school. And he's like, that guy has to be Willy Wonka. And I'm like, I've also seen those videos. And I will say, maybe this is why I don't work in Hollywood because the first thought that popped into my mind was definitely not, that's Willy Wonka right there. I saw a white kid rapping in high school and I was like, yeah, he's having a good time. My first thought was not, we need to get this guy in a brown top hat and a purple jacket. But like apparently the director did, so credit where credit is due. It worked. But yeah, Timothy Chalamet, he actually did a very good job. Timothy Chalamet has made me cry multiple times now, and I'm proud to say that all of them were in the Wonka movie. Granted, it's just because Dune doesn't really make me cry because it's just action and I love it. I love
It's
it, don't get me
sci-fi.
wrong, but it's amazing action. But yeah, Timothy Chalamet made me cry twice. Both of the times were in the Wonka movie, so leave me alone. I'm still healing from that. But the story, similar to, it had a very interesting setup because it did dive more into the backstory of Willy Wonka.
Hmm.
But it was only the backstory of like Willy Wonka and how he met the Oompa Loompa. We didn't see, obviously, because it's a prequel, any of the Chocolate Factory kids. So this is the first property we've seen of Wonka where he isn't in the Chocolate Factory. But we do get to see him at spots around town where he has pop up shops. We do see him in one of the actual stores in the main shopping court. And then we get to finally at the end, we do see construction of his chocolate factory. And it is very reminiscent of the Gene Wilder chocolate factory. Um, so it works out. Um, what did you think of the backstory in this movie?
I thought they did it really well. Like I don't know if they ever alluded to any of that in the original. I don't remember, but I thought it fit perfectly. Like I thought it was great. I was intrigued the whole time. Very interested. Um, I was also going to ask you, do you know if that was like the town, the actual town that he set up the factory in? Because
Oh,
I
I have
don't
no
remember that
idea.
either. Okay.
I have no
Okay.
idea.
Okay.
That yeah. But I will say that for this one, I was interested that they were able to, because like the Johnny Depp one, we did go, I would argue, in that movie, we dove a little bit deeper into Willy Wonka's backstory than we did in this one. This one kind of kept it, like, obviously the whole movie is a prequel, so it technically is all his backstory. But, like, his base or his foundation of what made him Willy Wonka, of, like, his mother and her chocolate, I was very interested that they touched on that without having that be the main story.
Hmm.
They were like, "Hey, we're gonna include references, and like, yeah, we're gonna show like one flashback and then one like aspiration," but they didn't focus on it the whole time. They didn't let that narrative take over the entire story. They had an actual story with like glimpses of what made him Wonka. Um, and I thought that was very interesting. I liked it. I also would have liked if we would have gotten a little bit more of it. Seeing like I think they mention it once, but like what happened to his mother? I don't know if they were like planning a sequel or maybe I just missed it. But I would have liked to kind of learn a little bit more about what happened to his mom. I know. Oh, I do believe that they mentioned that like she got sick, and then
I
just
was
like
gonna say, I assumed that she
yeah,
died.
I think that they mentioned that like she got sick and died,
Yeah,
but I thought it was very quick of like, oh yeah, she got sick and died, and then I moved on. I'm like,
yeah.
huh? Like, what happened though? Like, what happened between she got sick and I'm running around Mumbai robbing the Oompa Loompas? Like, what? There's a lot of stuff in there.
That was
Um,
Loompa Land, not Mumbai.
yeah, fair. But it was funny because it was like I was just taken aback. I was interested that they were able to give us a backstory, but also like not only focus on like what made him a chocolatier. They're like, no, we're gonna focus on like him opening the first, like how his experience was being a first time chocolatier. So like they show him he's very good at making chocolate. His chocolate is very good, but
Mhm.
he just wants to become famous in the store that his mom wanted him to see one day, which was
Yeah.
very sweet, very touching. This movie is very, in a good way. Let me point that out before I get destroyed. Very cheesy in a good way. It's not bad at all. I appreciate its cheesiness. That's probably what led me most to tears. Um, Noodle, very good in the movie. Wow, did they hate this child? This child was like, she went through a lot, and they wanted me to feel bad for Wonka. I left this movie like, wow, they messed Noodle up. Like, she went through it in this film. She was stuck in this workhouse ever since she was a baby. So she was raised legitimately being like a worker, forced to like do all of the bidding of these people. And it was just crazy. They threw her down a laundry chute. Wild. So they threw her down the
As a
laundry
baby,
chute, yeah, as a
as a
baby, which
newborn
was
baby.
added extra spice on top of it. I'm like, that's extra messed up. And yeah, they dropped her down there as a baby. Even crazier that instead of adopting her, the lady was just like, "Oh, I'm gonna charge you a fee for being dropped in my laundry basket." And I'm like, what an interesting takeaway from a baby being dropped into your laundry basket. But so that happens, and other than that happening, that's where we get Willy Wonka coming into the story. They have the other background characters. One of them was like the accountant for Slugworth. I think it was Slugworth. One of them was like the accountant for the actual Slugworth and saw all the crimes. The other one was a failed comedian, which I was like, oh, are we about to get Joker 2 going into? We're about to, all it takes is one bad day, and we just see Timothy Chalamet like, whoa, like, I'm Batman. But we had the failed comedian, and then I forget what the
the
other
the
lady
phone
was.
lady, she was like
Yes, there was the
a
phone lady.
communications person.
Correct. You're so right on that.
Um, there was one more, I think. I don't remember what she did.
Me neither. It's funny because at the end of the movie, I don't remember the other lady being there, so I legitimately think she just dipped out of town.
She was the first one to join in to help them. Like besides Noodle, she like turned on her light and she was like, "I want to help you," but I don't know if they mentioned what she did.
I can't remember her being in the end of the movie. Maybe I'm just crazy.
She was. I'm pretty sure she was,
I
but
don't know
like
how I
very
literally watched this movie like 4 days ago. I don't know how
to
I've forgotten so
to
much.
be fair, I watched it today, literally.
I mean, yeah, but I don't. I watched it 4 days ago. I feel like I should remember more of this character. But yeah, it's. I thought they were good backup characters, and I thought that it was very sweet of them to like. It wasn't totally unbelievable for me to be like, oh wow, they would totally join in because the way that they're like, oh, these people are going to join in is by saying like they try his chocolate, and they
Hmm.
realize like, hey, you've got something going on here. Like
Yeah, the one
you should
the one guy's
capitalize. And
like,
the accountant goes, that chocolate can't be this good. Where do we
I'm.
start?
Where do we start? Yeah,
Where do
that's
we
what I was gonna
start?
mention.
Where are we going? How much are you charging? What are the royalty fees? Like, how much is the packaging? He was on it. And my favorite is when they open that little girl's closet and he's just sitting in there with stacks of coins, like, we're going to be filthy rich selling this chocolate. And I'm like, that's awesome.
He's got like a
Um,
graph in the background showing like.
yeah, he's like, guys, the profits are going up. And then I love how in the song, if you've never had chocolate like this, it shows us the three main chocolatiers whose profits are plummeting because they're all
Yeah.
only buying Willy Wonka's chocolate. I'm like, that's hilarious. But yeah, I think my favorite part of this movie is really the performance of Timothy Chalamet. He carries this movie. Like
Hmm.
it starts with him and it ends with him.
Hmm.
And I think that that was a very good idea. The supporting characters were great and they supported well, but Timothy, very good actor, was able to carry this movie on his shoulders. And I
Yeah.
think that's, yeah, he is very talented at that. He's very good at being a leading man. So honestly, if I was ever a director, I would be nervous to put him in a supporting role because I'm like, you're a leading man. Like, you need to be at the front of this movie. I know that he's been a supporting character before. I haven't personally seen the movie, but I do know that he was a supporting character in Don't Look Up, the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence. I know he was in that. I haven't seen that yet. I need to watch it, but I have not watched it yet. I've heard that Timothy Chalamet is funny in it, so I'll have to watch that. I'll get back. I'll get back to you on that. But overall, what are your thoughts on Paul Muad'Dib, Willy Wonka, Atreides?
I thought it was phenomenal. Like, I'm not like a huge musical guy. I know you are. I'm not. But I went into it not thinking that, and I wasn't a huge fan of Timothy Chalamet. To be fair, I hadn't seen any of his movies. I went into it not thinking I was gonna like it, and I loved it. I thought it was amazing.
You were
Like,
just jealous of all the all these girls are hitting on him online. I got competition.
yeah, I can't lie.
Like,
That's probably why I didn't like him. Like
that's the biggest reason.
a huge reason why I didn't like him. And
Grant, that's the same reason we all hated, all of us young kids hated Justin Bieber when we were
it is,
13.
it is, it is. Yep.
It's funny because I was like, man, Justin Bieber's gonna steal all my girlfriends, and then I switched over to boyfriends, and I'm like, we're all right, Biebs. Like, you don't got to worry about me anymore, brother. You can get you get them. But other than that, that's really all of the Willy Wonka content. There is I don't know if you know this. As you said, I am the musical guy. There is indeed a Willy Wonka musical or a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory musical, and it does go a little bit more based off of the book. It's more cartoony than the movies really are. It's a lot of fun. Is a musical though, so I highly recommend checking that out. It has one of my favorite Broadway actors in it, Christian Borle. He is phenomenal. He was also he was he's phenomenal in everything he does. He played what's known as the Bard in a very, very good musical. And he also played. a character in Falsettos. He played one of the dads who, like, this dad got married, has a kid, realizes he's gay, runs off with Andrew Rannells as his boyfriend. They're both phenomenal. They're great singers. Christian Borle, phenomenal singer. So highly recommend checking out the Willy Wonka musical too. Call it Willy Wonka musical. It's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
I've
But
never heard of that, so I will have to check that out.
highly recommend checking it out. Pure Imagination is in it because it's like that's just the staple of Willy Wonka at this point. But yeah, highly recommend checking it out if you haven't. I think it's very good. Granted, I love musicals. I think they're a lot of fun. I love having fun. I'm a guy where if I'm bored, I'm like, honestly, just someone hit me with a car. I have to be doing something fun at all times. If I'm bored, I'm like, what is life about? Existence is a prison. Like I turn into Mr. Meeseeks as soon as I'm not actively doing something at any point in the day, which is also just known as mental illness. But other than that, do you have any final thoughts on any or all of these movies? Oh wait, I didn't ask. What would you rate this movie?
Oh, wait. You gotta go back now. You gotta go back. I
You
was
got to
gonna
go
say,
back.
you didn't ask me this, but my favorite part of the movie was the Oompa Loompa guy. When he starts breaking out into the song, I died. I lost it. I thought it was hilarious.
I think that one of my favorite little parts of the movie, is one of the Chocolatiers. Every time they mention killing someone, which is sounds morbid.
A little
Number one,
accident.
but yeah, he's sitting there. He's like a little accident, and the guy chimes
In
in
which
like
they die.
result in which they die, and he's
Yeah.
like, we covered that, like we all knew, and he does it. I think like 2 to 3 times, and it was funny to me every single time
Yes,
because
I
I'm like,
agree.
I do have friends like that where it's like, yeah, we clocked that. Like you didn't have to repeat that. And it no, not you. But it was like it was just so funny. Um it's that was honestly one of my favorite parts. But other than that, I'm big on the musical aspect. So every time a song was playing, I was legitimately like dancing around my living room like this is so much fun. All my cats are looking at me like get the doctors, grab the straitjacket. Like this guy is out of his flippin' mind.
Lock him up.
Yeah, and that's what my cats are cheering at me. Like meow meow meow. Like lock that man, bailiff, get that man out of here. But yeah, it's I yeah. What would you rate this film?
So I think I would also rate that. I would say 8 out of 10. Eight
Okay,
chocolate bars out of 10.
got him. So pre-diabetes realm, that works.
Yeah,
Like that
yeah.
works for me. I'm honestly, yeah, I'm at the same with you because well, what did we rate the original? I think we said 7.5.
7.5. Well, you said seven. I said 7.5.
You're right.
And then I said 8.5 for Johnny Depp, and you agreed.
Yeah, I'll stick with 8 on this one.
Okay.
I'll stick with
Yeah,
8.
because I
That's
can't
a
put
good
it higher
rating.
than the Johnny Depp one. We just established that that was
We
our
just
favorite one.
established that that was our favorite. I de- we might get hate crimed in the street if we mark Paul Muad'Dib, Willy Wonka Atreides above Gene Wilder as the original. I already have friends who literally want to have me drawn and quartered for liking the Johnny Depp one over Gene Wilder. But you
You
know
know, I
what?
think that's an unpopular opinion. I was afraid that you were going to disagree with me on that.
No, come after me. I don't care. That's about it for all of the Willy Wonka stuff. Thank you, Owen, for jumping on last minute when I say, do you want to talk about Willy Wonka with me today? And me seeing the bubbles like, this guy's probably like, what is wrong with Josh? Like, he wants to talk about Willy Wonka, dude? What?
Dude, I'm all for it. I really liked the movies as a child. Like like they were really good growing up. I loved them a lot.
Plus, I'm very happy that I was like, "Oh, you have to watch Wonka," and you watched it. And then before we even started recording, you're like, "That movie was so good. I'm gonna listen to the music. This is phenomenal." Cameron made me stop watching this, and I just want to go back home and watch it now. I just want to finish it. And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you
I did
like
not say
it.
that. I did
You
not say
didn't.
that.
You didn't. But I'm just stirring the pot a little bit. Stirring the
Don't
pot.
stir the pot. We don't
I'm
need
gonna."
that.
but it was so funny. I was like, yes, somebody,
I was
yes.
gonna say it was funny because the first song I was kind of like, nah, and then the more it got into the music, I was like, I was also like dancing along to it, like,
You were like
yeah,
apprehensive at first, and then there's a certain
yes,
point where you're like, oh, I can't stop bobbing my head. Like, this is too
yes,
good. And
yes,
then by the
literally,
third song,
yes, exactly like
you're
that.
like, I get it. That was me with Greatest Showman, honestly. So I get it. It's not like
I
Greatest Showman came
also,
out, and I'm like, oh my god. And then by the midway of the movie, I'm like, when the world becomes a fantasy, and I'm like, yep,
dude,
yep, we're
I
in.
also went into that movie thinking like I'm not gonna like this movie. Like you're kidding me? Wolverine is playing a musical guy, which I didn't know that he had done before. And then I go into the
Oklahoma.
movie.
He
I
was in
did not know that.
Oklahoma,
I didn't know
and
that.
he originated a role on Broadway, playing a very famous piano player who is real life famous piano player who was married to Liza Minnelli, the daughter of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, so I found that out after watching The Greatest Showman because I was like, the Wolverine can sing? What? And then I
Yeah.
looked it up and I was like, yes, he's been in multiple musicals, and it's like, oh,
Yeah, he was
okay.
big on Broadway before
So
breaking into Hollywood.
So it was more like he went from being like a Broadway guy to being the Wolverine and not the other way around, but I had no idea.
Correct. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I think I think he won a Tony before he actually ever walked into the movie world because
I think you're right.
he got a Tony for that role. When he was playing the piano player, I was like, this is it was so good. I go to Rio. There's so many good songs in that musical that he was in. It's phenomenal. Boy Next Door, phenomenal. I'll have to send you. I'm just gonna send you the name of the musical. So and then I'm like,
Okay.
oh, and just listen to musicals. They're so fun.
I will have to. I
This
will have
entire
to.
movie just results in me going, oh, and you're just gonna watch musicals now. I'm just gonna make you watch
Okay,
musicals.
so I've watched maybe only like three or four, and they've all been good. So it's like I don't know why I said that ever. Like I don't know. I just had the stigma, I guess. I was just like, I don't think I'm gonna like this. This isn't really my type of thing. But I never watched it.
But other than that, we're gonna be talking again soon, Owen. But thank you for talking to me about Willy frickin' Wonka.
Yes, it was awesome.
Other than that, man, enjoy the rest of your nerdy day.